Hello everyone, my name is Ben Chu, Horticulture Supervisor of the Japanese Garden and South Gardens. Today I'm going to take you on a tour of the Teahouse Island and of the tea house. Our beginning of our journey will begin by crossing what we call the earthen bridge that's behind me. The earthen bridge suggests a movement from an outside environment to a more inner environment, or more urban environment to a rural environment. So you'll have earthen bridges or natural stone bridges. Those types of bridges are suggestive of that sort of transition from one environment to another. Earthen bridges typically are logs laid over a bridge support. There's clay that would be packed onto the surface of the bridge, and then a growing medium on top of that where you would grow either some sort of ground cover or turf grass. In our situation here is concrete, so it can withstand a lot of foot traffic over time. One of the features that we will see as we cross the earthen bridge is a snow viewing lantern that is placed at the edge of the island. This particular lantern is characterized by its umbrella-shaped cap set over the firebox. Normally these types of lanterns you would find along a water's edge. This particular lantern was a gift to the city of St. Louis from our sister city in Japan, Seiwa. Craftsmen carved it in Japan. It was shipped here and set in place by the craftsmen who were part of that project. As we make our way to the tea house, we'll travel along some stepping stones placed into the landscape. Stepping stones came to the Japanese garden landscape during between the 12th and 13th century, 14th century, when tea ceremonies became more popular in the culture. Stepping stones were meant as a way to convey the guests from point A to point B, from outside the garden through what we call the tea garden up to the tea house. Stepping stones were meant as a way to keep your feet from getting wet and free from mud. Also, the stepping stones act as a means by which it would slow the pace of the guests to the tea house. Stepping stones also are a little uneven, so that it is necessary for one to be conscious of where they're stepping, where each foot will fall before proceeding on to the next. And that just brings you to the ability of the stepping stones to make you more conscious, more aware, more in tune with your environment. Some of the stepping stones are set in a way so that when you pause on them, you're able to see a full amount of the landscape. This is intentional by the designer to place what's called a viewing stone or a path dividing stone, which is what I'm standing on right now. This particular stone is set in a place so that as you stop and pause and look around at the landscape, you're looking at a view that the designer felt was very unique or important to him. The landscape that we are walking through towards the tea house is called a roji, or a dewy path. The idea of this landscape is that it is meant to present a composition of plantings that is going to be harmonious and calming, so that as you're walking towards the tea house, you can begin to calm yourself, ease your mind, prepare yourself to participate in the tea ceremony. The composition of the landscape is intended to be much more a stylized, naturalistic environment or naturalistic landscape. As we approach the tea house, we're going to walk through a corridor of bamboo and through a series of courtyards. The idea of this little alleyway is to create more enclosure and also provides much more of a sense of separation from the outside world compared to the inner world of the tea house and of the tea ceremony. The hedge is sheared and pruned so that it creates a wall on either side. Trees are pruned in such a way so that there also provides an overhead, a ceiling to you as you walk through. So you're fully embraced by the landscape as you're walking towards the tea house. The first of the series of courtyards is the outer courtyard. The idea of this courtyard is that one is to stop and appreciate the landscape that is presented to you. This courtyard is pretty much bathed in sunlight throughout the day, and you'll see as we transition between this courtyard and the next series of courtyards how the exposure will change and the mood will change as you move from this area to the next. As we leave the outer courtyard, we're going to transition into a middle courtyard, and that movement will be through a gate that's covered but yet has no actual fencing on either side. The idea of the gate is not so much to keep people out, but to suggest a movement from the outside world to the inner world of the tea ceremony. As we pass through the set of gates into the middle courtyard, we'll follow the stepping stone path that's laid out for us. And about midway along that travel, you'll encounter an offset paving that's totally different than the material of the stepping stone, and also has a little bit of a jog in the path. Again, this is a type of pavement that's used to make you aware, draw your attention back to the present and your surroundings. So now we've reached the tea house. The tea house is a style of tea house called the Seiwa-en style tea house. It's which means farmhouse style tea house. This is fashioned after many farmhouses that you might see in the countryside of Japan. Above this lower roof is a plaque. That plaque says Nagano-an, which is the little house of Nagano. This particular tea house was a gift to the state of Missouri from Nagano Prefecture. It was built in Japan, dismantled, shipped over here, and reassembled by a group of craftsmen from Matsumoto City. And they reassembled it here on site. After its completion, it was the tea house was blessed with the Shinto ceremony. The tea house is a natural structure, does not use any paint to derive its color, and there are no materials used to preserve the materials used in its construction. Most of the material that is utilized is allowed to weather naturally, age, and develop a patina of its own, which is considered a more natural look and a much more harmonious look to the structure. The interior of the tea house is all natural materials as well. The coatings on the wall are a mixture of clay and sand and pulverized straw, and that's applied over the surface of the tea house. The tatami mats, those are made out of straw, rice straw, and these are about 2 inches in thickness, and they're made up of the stems of the plant that are laid alternately over each other, and then they're sewn together. and then a finer, more high quality straw is used to cover the surface. Each of these mats is about 60 pounds, so they're really quite substantial, quite heavy. These were actually made, this is a second set, and it was made by a family in San Francisco whose family had been involved in making tatami mats for a number of generations. The alcove in the back where the scroll is hanging on the wall is called the tokonoma. Typically during a tea ceremony, one will have either a calligraphy hanging in the alcove, or perhaps a painting or an ink wash, something that suggests or that represents the season and the occasion for the gathering of the tea for tea ceremony. The vase would have a floral arrangement, a chabana. There's a school of flower arrangement that is specific to tea ceremony, and that's called chabana. And normally there would be a flower arrangement in that vase. That particular calligraphy on the wall is Ichigo Ichie, which means one opportunity, one chance, so that everyone recognizes the fact that we only go through each moment in time once, and you'll never regain that moment. So you have to make fully take use of the situation when you're in it. This particular post on the left of the tokonoma, the alcove, is actually a piece of zelkova wood. In Japan, because of the limited land mass that they have, a lot of the timber is stored underwater. That particular piece was underwater and was debarked after it was brought up from under the water, and it exhibited this mottled appearance and was felt to be very attractive, so they used it as part of the tea house. The one piece to the left of that is actually a piece of cryptomeria. Cryptomeria being a very important forest and timber tree in Japan. Also, many older specimens of cryptomeria are considered sacred in Japan. As a guest of a tea ceremony, one would come to the garden and would be asked to wait across the lake before coming on to Teahouse Island, and you would wait at what we have as the plum viewing arbor as a place to sort of cool yourself and take pause before you're asked to come over to Teahouse Island. As you come over to Teahouse Island, again, you will come to an area where one would pause. You'll see this little waiting structure here, which is attached to the tea house. You would come here, you would sit on this bench, you would take an opportunity to enjoy the shade, maybe take a little bit of water and appreciate the landscape that's around you. After you have had a sufficient amount of time to cool yourself in the waiting arbor, and you're invited to enter the tea house, you would move along the stepping stone paths over to the water basin that is always associated with the tea house. You'll typically always have a basin nearby. Basins, along with the stepping stone paths and lanterns, that were introduced as part of the tea culture. This particular type of basin is called a kneeling water basin, and from this basin what you'll do is you'll take the ladle, you'll draw water from with the ladle, you'll place it in your hand, wash your hands, and then pour water in your hand and take into your mouth and rinse your mouth as suggesting purification of your mind and your heart to prepare your way to the tea ceremony. This particular arrangement of stones is pretty much exact to almost all these types of basins associated with tea ceremonies. One will typically always be a higher stone, which will be where the student or the assistant will place a lantern, and then the other stone lower in elevation is where the pot will be placed to gather water. Aside from being a place where the guests will take water, this is also water that will be utilized for the tea ceremony. So the lantern on one stone, the higher stone, a kettle on the lower stone, and then water is taken from the basin and placed into that kettle and then utilized in the tea ceremony. After you've taken your moment at the water basin, you'll come to this smaller lower door of the tea house. This is the usual means by which you'll enter the tea house. The reason this door is so low and so small is that it places you in a bowed position, in a humble position before you enter into the tea house. In the tea room, once you've entered into the tea room, you are all at the same elevation, at the same level, so that anyone can enter the tea room and be equal to all those that are inside the tea room. The low elevation of this opening, it was once said that it was a means by which it would prevent samurai from bringing their swords into the tea house. During the time that tea ceremonies was taken up by the samurai class, there were actually racks outside the tea rooms, tea houses, where swords were meant to be placed. This is a typical utensils that you would find in a tea ceremony. This is the brazier. This is where the water is heated, and once the water is heated, it's taken from there and it's placed into this little pot right here. This is where the hot water will go, the ceramic pot. Once that's transferred to that, then they would go to pick up the tea scoop, remove the tea from the tea carrier. You see how this is has it's like bamboo on the top of it, but that's going to be taken from the tea carrier with the bamboo scoop and placed into the tea bowl. Often that's accompanied by, you would often hear the sound of the scoop as it's tapped on the tea bowl. So once that is the tea is placed in there, then the tea master would take the lid of the hot water jar, take the ladle, remove just the right amount of water, and pour it into the tea bowl. Once the water is added, that's also wiped off and placed onto the ladle rest. Once the water has been added to the bowl that already has the powdered tea in it, then it's this bamboo whisk is used to whisk the tea and the water mixture until it has a perfect, in the mind of the tea master, the perfect amount of foam on the surface. Once that's done, then the tea master will give it to either the first guest or to an assistant who will give it to each of the guests in the room. What would happen is that the tea master would select a bowl, the best face of the bowl, and turn it so that face is pointing outwards and towards the assistant or towards the guest. Once the guest accepts the bowl, he admires the bowl and its unique characteristics. They'll drink from that bowl, turn it back around so the face is outward, and place it onto the mat. And typically they'll they'll say thank you, arigato gozaimasu, for the tea, and then the next bowl would be made and it would go around the room. I hope you all have enjoyed this experience, the virtual tour of the Teahouse Island and the tea house. Often I'm asked about the reason it's closed to the public on a regular basis, and the reason being is that this is a very secluded area. Number one, it's a very small in space, not a lot of room to accommodate lots of crowds. It's a delicate structure that's made from traditional materials and requires craftsmen using traditional techniques to maintain it. It's also a gift from Nagano Prefecture to the state of Missouri, and we try our best to maintain it as well as possible.